The hum of the engines vibrated softly through the cabin as passengers eased into their seats, some lost in the glossy pages of magazines, others glued to their phones. Olivia Carter sat by the window in first class, a sleek, leather journal resting gently on her lap. A silver pen hovered over the untouched paper, waiting for inspiration to strike. Olivia treasured these rare moments, flying above the clouds, unreachable by phone calls or emails. In this suspended world, she found peace. But today, serenity felt distant. From the corner of her vision, Olivia caught sight of a flight attendant. The woman was thin, with sharp, scrutinizing eyes that lingered a little too long. Olivia dismissed it. She was used to this, being observed, questioned, silently judged. First class was not a space people often expected her to occupy. As the plane lifted through the skies, the overhead compartments gave a slight rattle. Olivia carefully slid her pen into the journal's spine and lightly gripped the armrests. A few passengers shifted nervously, but Olivia remained steady. Turbulence was routine. At least, that's what she told herself. The first sign of trouble wasn't the shaking, it was the return of that same flight attendant. Her smile was tight, more forced than friendly. "Excuse me, ma'am," she said, voice dipped in syrup but edged with something else. "Is everything all right?" Olivia looked up, surprised. "Yes. Why do you ask?" The attendant's gaze flickered over Olivia's tailored blazer and the elegant gold watch on her wrist, before settling once more on her face. "You seemed uneasy, just making sure you're comfortable." The weight of the unspoken pressed down heavily between them. Olivia recognized this tone. It was subtle, but unmistakable. "You don't belong here." Years of experience taught Olivia how to handle these moments. She offered a polite smile, as polished as glass. "I'm perfectly fine, thank you." The flight attendant hesitated, searching Olivia's expression as if hoping to find something amiss. When she found nothing, she turned and slipped back into the galley. Still, the tension didn't leave. It curled inside Olivia like a knot pulled too tight. Minutes later, the turbulence grew stronger. The lights flickered overhead, and a few startled gasps echoed through the cabin. Olivia remained calm, fingers wrapped lightly around her journal. But then she noticed something strange. The flight attendant was at the front of the cabin, speaking hurriedly to the pilot, who cracked open the cockpit door just enough to listen. Olivia's instincts stirred uneasily. The turbulence faded as swiftly as it came, replaced by the captain's calm voice over the intercom. "Ladies and gentlemen, our apologies for the rough air. We've adjusted our altitude, and the rest of the flight should be smooth." The passengers relaxed, murmuring with relief. Olivia tried to shake off the lingering discomfort and return to writing. But tranquility didn't last. The cockpit door opened fully, and the pilot stepped out, his eyes scanning the rows until they locked onto her. "You," he said, loud enough to slice through the murmurs. Olivia blinked, unsure. "Excuse me? You've been causing disruptions," the pilot continued, his voice firm and unwavering. Heads turned. The once quiet cabin became heavy with curious stares. Confusion rippled through Olivia's chest. "I don't understand. I haven't done anything." The pilot folded his arms, exuding authority. "We've received complaints about your aggressive demeanor." The accusation knocked the breath from Olivia. Aggressive? She had barely spoken since takeoff. "There must be some mistake," she replied, careful to keep her voice steady. "I've been sitting here the entire time." The murmurs intensified, whispers creeping along the rows like wildfire. Some passengers glanced at Olivia with concern, others with suspicion. Her heart tightened. She had built a life beyond the shadows of stereotypes, fought tirelessly to be seen as more than a headline or statistic. Yet here she was, reduced to one in an instant. "Ma'am," the pilot's tone hardened. "If you can't comply, I'll have to move you to another seat, for everyone's safety." That word, safety, cut through her like ice. Blade loaded with unspoken prejudice, Olivia Carter squared her shoulders and locked eyes with the pilot. "I'm not moving," she said calmly, her voice unwavering. "I paid for this seat like everyone else." The pilot's jaw clenched, his face hardening. "If you refuse to cooperate, I'll have to involve security when we land." Olivia's hands trembled beneath the surface, but she refused to let them see her waver. "Do what you have to," she replied steadily, though her chest felt like a storm was raging inside it. She wouldn't give them the satisfaction of breaking her. The pilot lingered just long enough to make his authority known before turning sharply and disappearing into the cockpit. The flight attendant, however, paused, her lips curling into a faint, satisfied smirk before following him. Olivia sank into her seat, her pulse pounding in her ears. Around her, whispers filled the cabin, low but unmistakable. The judgment from her fellow passengers hung heavy in the air, pressing down on her like lead. She closed the journal in her lap. There was no focusing now. The rest of the flight stretched before her like an endless horizon, cold and unforgiving. Olivia shifted her gaze to the window, watching clouds drift beneath them. But even there, she found no comfort. Her reflection stared back, calm and poised on the surface, though barely concealing the fire burning behind her eyes. Her fingers gripped the armrests, knuckles white as she fought to keep herself composed. The murmurs grew louder. She caught snippets of conversations. A man muttering behind her, his words wrapped in condescension. She must have done something to set them off. A woman's voice followed, smug and dismissive. First class isn't for everyone. Olivia's stomach twisted, but she stayed rooted, and swallowing the words she longed to hurl back at them. She knew how this would play out. Any move she made, any word, any glance, would be reshaped to fit their narrative. The aggressive woman who didn't belong. Her journal lay untouched on her lap, its gold-embossed initials glinting faintly under the cabin lights. It had been a gift to herself, a celebration after signing her first major contract, a reminder of how far she had come. Now, it felt hollow, as if none of it mattered. The flight attendant returned, gliding down the aisle with brisk efficiency. This time, she didn't stop by Olivia's row, but her gaze, brief, sharp, filled with disdain, brushed Olivia like a blade. Olivia's heart pounded faster. She scanned the cabin, searching for a sympathetic face, but everyone around her looked away. Even those who seemed uncomfortable with the scene kept their eyes fixed on screens or pretended to sleep. Complicity in silence. The turbulence outside had long since calmed, but inside, the storm churned on. "Ladies and gentlemen," the captain's voice returned, smooth and detached. "We've reached cruising altitude. We'll begin beverage service shortly. Thank you for your patience." Olivia let out a quiet scoff. Patience. How much of it did they expect her to have? She shifted in her seat, seeking comfort she wouldn't find. The drink cart rattled closer. The flight attendant, all smiles and charm, poured wine and sparkling water for the other passengers. Her voice light and pleasant, but when she reached Olivia's row, her cheerfulness evaporated. "Would you like something to drink?" she asked, her voice flat. Olivia hesitated. Refusing out of pride crossed her mind, but she knew better. "Water," she said simply, her tone clipped but controlled. The attendant poured a glass, setting it down with a deliberate clink before moving on without another word. Her laughter returned for the next passenger as if Olivia no longer existed. Olivia lifted the glass to her lips, letting the cool water steady her for a moment. But the fire beneath her skin refused to fade. She leaned back against the headrest and closed her eyes, exhaling slowly. Each breath was a quiet battle, to stay calm, to stay present. And yet, no matter how many times she replayed the scene, dissecting every word, every glance, she found no reason. There had been none. No matter how she dissected the events, the truth remained crystal clear. This wasn't about her actions. It was about her existence. Hours passed in a strange, heavy silence. The occasional announcement drifted from the cockpit, punctuated by the quiet rustle of passengers shifting in their seats. Olivia Carter sat still, her mind tracing the winding path that had led her here. Her life had been a series of battles, each obstacle overcome with relentless determination. She thought of late nights in the office, the sacrifices that had shaped her journey, and the quiet moments of doubt that whispered, "Is it worth it?" But here she was, reduced to a label, judged by people who knew nothing of the weight she carried or the walls she had dismantled brick by brick. As the plane dipped into descent, Olivia felt a flicker of relief. The ordeal would soon end. She could step off this aircraft, leave the suffocating atmosphere behind, and reclaim her peace. But even as the thought surfaced, she knew better. This wasn't just about her. It was about everyone who had endured the same quiet indignities, the invisible burdens that stacked silently on their shoulders, pressing down without mercy. The plane landed with a jarring thud, pulling Olivia from her thoughts. Around her, passengers stirred, gathering coats and bags with the kind of ease reserved for those unaware of the battles fought in plain sight. Olivia remained seated. Deliberate, she carefully tucked her journal into her bag and reached for her coat from the overhead bin, every motion unhurried. She wouldn't let them see her rush, wouldn't let them witness even a flicker of unease. As she stepped into the aisle, the pilot stood near the exit, arms crossed, expression unreadable. The flight attendant lingered beside him, her ever-present smile as fixed as the stale air in the cabin. Olivia walked past without acknowledgement, head high though her heart pounded with each step. "Ma'am?" The pilot's voice sliced through the moment, laced with condescension that hung in the air like fog. "I hope you understand. We were just following protocol." Olivia paused. For a brief second, she considered responding, laying bare exactly what she thought of his protocol. But not now. She turned her head just enough to meet his gaze, her expression unreadable. "You'll be hearing from me," she said quietly, the calm edge in her voice sharper than any outburst. The pilot's smirk was thin, as if he had already dismissed her. Olivia let the silence speak for itself, stepping off the plane and into the terminal. Cool air brushed against her skin, carrying with it a sense of freedom she hadn't felt in hours. But the fire inside her hadn't dimmed. She pulled out her phone and dialed. "It's me," she said when the call connected. "We need to talk. Something happened on my flight." The voice on the other end was steady, grounding. "What do you need?" Olivia's eyes scanned the bustling terminal, the swirl of hurried footsteps and the echo of distant announcements. "I need to remind them who they're dealing with." The voice belonged to Emma, her trusted assistant. "I'll handle it," Emma replied without hesitation. "I'll schedule the meetings and gather the documentation." Olivia ended the call and tucked her phone away. A deep breath filled her lungs, grounding her in the present. Still, the memory of the flight lingered, etched sharp and vivid, each detail replaying like a scene on loop. The glances, the whispers, the pilot's cold, dismissive tone. It wasn't the first time she had faced prejudice, but this time felt different, raw, unfiltered, and impossible to ignore. She adjusted her coat and moved through the terminal, her heels tapping softly against the polished floors. Heads turned as she passed. Some recognized her, though few could pinpoint exactly why. Olivia had grown used to the quiet stares that followed her. Today, those stares felt heavier, a reminder that there was still work to be done. The entrance to the airport lounge came into view, an oasis of calm against the whirlwind of the terminal. Plush chairs, soft lighting, and distant piano music whispered of exclusivity. At the reception desk, a young attendant greeted Olivia with professional poise. "Good afternoon, Miss Carter. Your suite is ready?" Olivia nodded in acknowledgement and followed the attendant down a quiet corridor. The suite was small but elegant, muted tones, soft leather seating, and a wide desk facing the tarmac. She set her bag down gently and lowered herself into the chair. Her hands brushed against the polished wood, grounding her further. Pulling out her journal, Olivia opened to a fresh page, and she began to write. Writing had always been Olivia Carter's refuge, a way to distill chaos into clarity. She pressed her pen to the paper, each word deliberate and measured. Flight 237, incident with pilot and crew. False accusations rooted in prejudice. Plan, address publicly but constructively. Leverage influence. Objective, change not revenge. Create policy to prevent future incidents. Her pen hovered in the air, trembling slightly. Olivia had always believed in using her voice to inspire and uplift, but this had struck deeper, igniting a resolve she hadn't felt in years. This wasn't just about the pilot or the attendant. It was about dismantling the system that allowed this behavior to persist unchecked. A soft knock pulled her from her thoughts. "Come in." The door opened, and Emma stepped inside, tablet in hand, a folder tucked under her arm. Olivia's assistant was sharp, steady, and one of the few people she trusted implicitly. "I got here as soon as I could," Emma said, placing the tablet on the desk. "I've already started compiling reports. There's some chatter online. A few passengers recorded what happened." Olivia's brow lifted slightly. "Videos?" Emma nodded. "One of them filmed the pilot confronting you. It's gaining traction." Leaning back in her chair, Olivia exhaled slowly. Social media could be unpredictable, a double-edged sword. But if handled carefully, this could become more than just viral content. I want a statement, Olivia said, her tone even but firm. Direct, measured. This isn't about one flight, it's about culture. This is systemic. Emma nodded, typing swiftly. Understood. I'll have a draft ready in an hour. Also, the CEO's office responded. They're willing to meet today. Olivia's lips curled into a faint smile. Good, let's make sure they understand exactly who they're dealing with. The hours before the meeting passed in a blur. Olivia pored over every detail, watching the grainy video clips Emma had compiled. She studied the pilot's stiff stance, the faint smirk on the flight attendant's face as she lingered in the background. Anger simmered beneath Olivia's calm exterior, but she let it fuel her focus, not consume it. Emotions were powerful, but precision created real change. As the meeting approached, Olivia stood before the mirror in the suite's restroom, smoothing her blazer with steady hands. The woman reflected back was unflinching, poised, commanding. She had negotiated multi-million-dollar deals, stood her ground in boardrooms filled with doubt, and built a legacy that couldn't be erased by the bias of a single crew member. Let's do this. The conference room was sleek and understated, but Olivia's presence filled the space as she stepped inside with Emma by her side. At the table sat David Morgan, the airline's CEO. His salt-and-pepper hair was neatly combed, his tailored suit crisp, every detail curated to project authority. Beside him, Evelyn Pierce, head of customer relations, offered Olivia a tight smile, her hands fidgeting with a pen. Morgan stood, extending his hand. Miss Carter, thank you for coming. I want to personally assure you we take this matter very seriously. Olivia accepted his handshake, her grip unwavering. I appreciate that, she replied, her tone neutral. But I'm not here for apologies. I'm here for accountability and solutions. Morgan's smile faltered, but he nodded and gestured for her to sit. Of course, he said carefully. Please, tell us how we can address this. Olivia placed her journal on the table, the embossed initials glinting beneath the soft light. Let's start with the incident, she said, lacing her fingers together. And then, we'll discuss how we prevent this from happening again. Her voice was calm, steady, but there was no mistaking the steel beneath it. This conversation wasn't just about her experience. It was about the countless others who lacked the platform to speak. And Olivia Carter wasn't leaving that room until change was set in motion. The air in the room felt taut, sharp as a scalpel slicing through silence. Olivia Carter's gaze didn't waver. Before we discuss solutions, she began, her voice smooth but firm, I want to understand how we got here. I'd like to know why a paying passenger who complied with every rule was humiliated in front of an entire cabin. And I'd like to know why those accusations, unfounded as they were, felt so easy to believe. James, the airline CEO, shifted in his seat. He straightened his tie, posture stiffening in preparation for a rebuttal. Miss Carter, let me start by saying we deeply regret how this unfolded. Our staff is trained to prioritize safety, and in this case, it appears there was a misjudgment. Olivia's brow arched. A misjudgment? She echoed, leaning back slightly. That's an interesting word. What exactly was being judged? My presence in first class? My demeanor? Her eyes narrowed, cutting through him. Or was it simply the color of my skin? The question lingered like smoke, suffocating in its weight. Evelyn Carr, head of customer relations, froze mid-note. James's polished expression flickered for just a breath before regaining composure. I assure you, Miss Carter, our policies are designed to ensure all passengers are treated fairly, James replied, his tone rehearsed but brittle. Olivia leaned forward, her elbows resting lightly on the table. If that were true, she said quietly, we wouldn't be sitting here. James's gaze faltered. Fairness isn't just a line in a manual, Olivia continued. It's reflected in decisions, in actions. What happened to me wasn't an isolated misjudgment, Mr. Lockwood. It was a reflection of a culture that tolerates bias. James pressed his lips into a thin line. We're committed to addressing these concerns. That's why we're here, to listen and take action. Good, Olivia replied. Let's start with the facts. She reached into her bag, withdrawing the folder Monica had meticulously prepared, and slid it across the table. James opened it, revealing a series of screenshots from the videos circulating online. Olivia had studied each image, dissecting the humiliation frame by frame. In one photo, the pilot loomed over Olivia, his finger jabbing toward her as other passengers looked on. Some curious, others visibly uncomfortable. Another captured the flight attendant just behind him, the unmistakable curve of a smirk tugging at her lips. His jaw tightened as he scanned the pages. Evelyn broke the silence, her voice soft but strained. "Miss Carter, were you aware these videos existed?" She glanced nervously at James. "They've attracted significant attention online. We're already taking steps to manage the fallout." Olivia tilted her head slightly. "Fallout?" she repeated, her tone like ice. "This isn't about public perception, Miss Carr. It's about accountability." She met Evelyn's eyes, holding them with quiet intensity. How many other passengers, especially passengers of color, have been treated this way but didn't have the platform to be heard? Evelyn shifted uncomfortably, glancing toward James for support. I don't have those numbers." "And that," Olivia cut in, her voice razor-sharp, "is exactly the problem. You don't have the numbers because no one's been looking. And if no one looks, no one fixes it." James exhaled deeply, leaning back in his chair. His fingers tapped softly against the edge of the table. "What do you propose, Miss Carter? What changes do you believe are necessary?" Olivia paused, gathering her thoughts. This wasn't about retaliation, it was about transformation. "First," she said evenly, "I want a full review of your staff training. That includes sensitivity training, implicit bias education, and a revision of customer service protocols. Your team needs to understand how their actions and inactions affect passengers." James nodded slowly. "That's reasonable. We can initiate that immediately." "Second," Olivia continued, "I want a dedicated diversity and inclusion officer. Someone to oversee this process and ensure it's more than just lip service. And they should report directly to you, Mr. Lockwood." James's jaw tensed, but he nodded. "I can agree to that." "Third," Olivia's voice hardened, "I want consequences." Evelyn's pen paused mid-sentence. "The individuals involved, the pilot and the flight attendant, should face disciplinary action, not to make an example of them, but to make it clear that this behavior isn't acceptable." Evelyn shifted uncomfortably. "Miss Carter, we have processes for handling employee conduct. And how often do those processes result in meaningful change?" Olivia interrupted, her eyes locking onto Evelyn. "This isn't just about me," she continued, her voice carrying weight beyond the walls of that room. "It's about setting a standard for how all passengers should be treated." Silence settled over the table. James exchanged a glance with Evelyn, then leaned forward, clasping his hands together. "You've made your point, Miss Carter," he said finally. "We'll implement your recommendations, and I'll personally oversee the review." "I hope you do," Olivia replied, "but I'll be watching." She met his gaze, unwavering. This wasn't the first time Olivia Carter had been underestimated, but it would be the last time someone mistook her silence for surrender. "Good," Olivia Carter said, handing the tablet back to Emma, "and reach out to the media contacts we trust. I want to give a statement, on my terms." Emma nodded briskly, fingers tapping away on her tablet. "I'll set up the interviews. Should we involve community leaders or advocacy groups?" "Yes," Olivia replied without hesitation. "This isn't just about me. It's about creating a ripple effect. The more voices involved, the harder it will be for them to dismiss this as an isolated event." Emma glanced at her, admiration flickering behind her focused gaze. Olivia had always been relentless, but there was something different this time. A sharper edge to her resolve. As the two women moved through the lounge, Olivia's thoughts returned to the video. Her composed demeanor on screen felt distant now, like she was watching a version of herself she'd cultivated over years of facing down prejudice with quiet resilience. But the truth was, she was tired. Tired of playing the role of the calm professional, tired of swallowing injustice in the name of grace. And yet she knew this wasn't the moment for anger, it was the moment for action. They stepped into Olivia's private suite, the room softly lit by afternoon sunlight filtering through floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the tarmac. The hum of distant engines outside grounded her as she sank into the plush chair, crossing her legs with practiced ease. Emma remained standing, waiting for further instruction. "Sit," Olivia said, gesturing to the seat across from her. "This isn't just a task list. I want you involved at every level." Emma lowered herself carefully, tablet balanced on her lap. "Understood, but I have to ask, what's our endgame here?" Olivia leaned forward, resting her elbows on her knees. "Accountability first, but long-term? I want a coalition, one that addresses systemic bias across the airline industry, not just empty training sessions, but real policy reform. Diversity in leadership, transparent reporting structures. Emma scribbled notes furiously. So not just this airline, the whole industry. Exactly, Olivia said. This has to be bigger than a press apology. If we do this right, it could set a precedent. A soft chime from Emma's tablet interrupted them. Statement draft ready, Emma announced. She slid the tablet across the table, allowing Olivia to review the words that would soon shape the public's perception of the incident. What happened to me on Flight 237 is not unique. It reflects a larger issue that too many passengers have faced in silence. I am choosing to speak out not to shame a single airline, but to advocate for systemic change in how passengers are treated regardless of race, background, or appearance. This moment should serve as a wake-up call, and I invite airlines across the industry to join me in creating lasting reform. Silence has never driven progress. Action will. Olivia's eyes scanned the words slowly. It was strong, but not incendiary. It held authority without bitterness. She handed the tablet back with a nod. Post it. Let's see how they respond. Within the hour, the statement was live. It spread quickly, shared by influencers, journalists, and advocacy groups. The video of the confrontation resurfaced alongside Olivia's carefully crafted words, turning what could have been a fleeting incident into a national conversation. Her phone buzzed. Messages of solidarity, invitations for interviews, and even calls from executives in other industries offering support. Emma set down her tablet, watching as Olivia scrolled through the flood of notifications. They're paying attention, she said quietly. They should, Olivia replied, exhaling deeply. This isn't going away. The weight she carried from the flight hadn't fully lifted, but as she gazed out over the runway, watching planes lift into the sky, she felt something shift. Hope. Not just for herself, but for the people who would come after her. And Olivia Carter intended to make sure that when they stepped onto their flights, they did so with dignity intact. Olivia Carter's eyes narrowed as she set the tablet down. The airline's apology sat on the screen, vague and hollow. Like words strung together by committee, just enough to say something but not enough to mean anything. This reads like they're trying to sweep it under the rug, Olivia muttered. Emma, seated across from her, nodded in agreement. Textbook PR move. They're hoping it dies down. Olivia's fingers tapped lightly against the table as she considered their next step. It won't die down, she said firmly. Draft a response from my account. Direct, professional, but sharp. Emma's eyes flickered with satisfaction. Tone? Calm, factual, unflinching, Olivia replied, her gaze cold but focused. Something like, a vague apology isn't accountability. I look forward to seeing real action, not just empty words from airline name. Emma's smirk grew as she typed. You never hold back, do you? Olivia met her eyes, the ghost of a smile touching her lips. Why should I? She said softly. They didn't hold back when they humiliated me. An hour later, Olivia's response was live. The post took flight immediately. Thousands of likes, retweets, and comments flooded in. People weren't just angry, they were galvanized. Her phone vibrated constantly with notifications. Journalists requesting interviews, advocacy groups offering support, even executives at other companies quietly reaching out to express solidarity. Emma watched the numbers climb in real time. This isn't slowing down. It's not supposed to, Olivia replied, eyes fixed on the screen. But just as she started to feel the weight of progress, her phone buzzed with an incoming call. The name flashing across the screen was David Lockwood, the CEO of the airline. Olivia exchanged a glance with Emma, whose expression darkened slightly. You taking it? Emma asked. Olivia nodded, exhaling slowly before swiping to accept. Mr. Lockwood, she greeted evenly. Miss Carter. David's voice was carefully measured. I wanted to reach out personally. I'm sure you've seen our statement, and I wanted to assure you we're conducting a full review, Olivia cut in smoothly. I've seen the statement. What I haven't seen is accountability. A pause. I understand your frustration, David replied. We recognize that mistakes were made, and I'd like to discuss next steps. Perhaps a meeting. I'm more than willing to meet, Olivia said, her tone unwavering. But let me be clear, this isn't about smoothing things over. This is about ensuring real, lasting change. A carefully worded press release won't be enough. David hesitated, the sound of papers shifting faintly in the background. "I hear you," he said, though the doubt in his voice was palpable. "Let's set something up. I'd like to hear your thoughts on how we move forward." Olivia's grip on the phone tightened slightly. "You'll do more than hear them," she replied calmly. "You'll act on them." The call ended a few minutes later. Emma watched as Olivia set the phone down, arching an eyebrow. "So?" Olivia leaned back in her chair, rolling her shoulders to ease the tension building there. "He wants a meeting," she said simply. Emma's expression was skeptical. "Think he'll actually follow through?" Olivia's gaze shifted out the window, watching as another plane taxied across the runway. "He will," she replied softly, "because he knows this isn't going away." Emma exhaled, tapping her pen against the table thoughtfully. "Should I start drafting a follow-up proposal?" Olivia nodded. "Yes, but not just for him. This is bigger than one airline. We're building something broader, industry-wide." Emma's eyes brightened. "A reform coalition?" Olivia allowed herself a small smile. "Exactly." The fire in her chest still burned, steady, controlled, and brighter than ever. The fight wasn't over, but Olivia Carter had no intention of backing down. Olivia Carter stepped into the conference room, her heels clicking softly against the polished floor. The hum of quiet conversation drifted through the space, but as she entered, all eyes shifted toward her. She carried herself with the kind of quiet authority that didn't need to be announced. It was felt the moment she crossed the threshold. Emma trailed just behind her, tablet in hand, eyes flicking across the room to assess the players at the table. Representatives from 3 major airlines sat along one side, their suits pressed and expressions carefully neutral. Across from them sat leaders from advocacy groups Olivia had long admired, people who had been fighting for equity long before this incident had propelled the issue into the spotlight. Olivia's gaze swept the room as she approached the head of the table. The nameplate before her read, "Olivia Carter, founder and CEO, Carter Global Ventures." It wasn't just a title. It was a reminder of everything she had built, everything no one could take from her. "Good morning," Olivia greeted as she took her seat. "Thank you all for being here." The room fell into a respectful silence. Emma set a folder beside Olivia, murmuring, "The agenda is ready." Olivia nodded subtly, folding her hands on the table. "This isn't just about what happened to me on Flight 237, she began, her voice steady and calm. "It's about ensuring that what happened never becomes routine for anyone else." Her words hung in the air for a moment before she continued. "Air travel is a symbol of connection, a gateway to opportunity. Yet, for too many passengers, those opportunities are marred by prejudice, profiling, and a lack of accountability. That needs to change. And it starts here." David Lockwood, the CEO of the airline at the center of the controversy, shifted slightly in his seat. His polished demeanor gave nothing away, but Olivia didn't miss the faint tension in his shoulders. "Miss Carter," he said, offering a rehearsed smile, "we appreciate your initiative in bringing us all together. I believe I speak for my colleagues when I say we're committed to improving." Olivia's gaze didn't waver. "I appreciate the sentiment, Mr. Lockwood. But words aren't enough. This isn't about soft promises. It's about concrete action." Emma handed out copies of a white paper Olivia had spent the better part of the night drafting. "This document outlines key initiatives for industry-wide reform," Olivia explained as the papers slid across the table. "Mandatory bias and sensitivity training, transparent reporting on passenger complaints, independent oversight for discrimination claims, and, most importantly, diversity in leadership at all levels of airline operations." Lockwood skimmed the paper, brow furrowing slightly. "These are ambitious," he remarked, though his tone remained measured. Olivia leaned forward, leveling him with a steady gaze. "Ambition," she replied, "is exactly what this moment demands." A representative from another airline chimed in, his voice cautious. "Miss Carter, implementing these measures will take time and resources." Olivia smiled faintly. "So does rebuilding trust." A quiet murmur rippled through the advocacy leaders seated across from the airline executives. Olivia could feel the weight of the moment shifting, momentum turning in her favor. Lockwood exhaled, his fingers tapping lightly against the folder. "And if we agree to these initiatives, what's next?" Olivia didn't hesitate. "Accountability," she said plainly. "This won't be a one-time meeting. We'll establish quarterly reviews involving independent auditors. Passengers will see the progress, not just through press releases, but through lived experiences. Emma watched closely as the room absorbed Olivia's words. She could sense the hesitation lingering among the executives. Olivia let the silence stretch just long enough to make them uncomfortable. "This isn't just about your airlines," she said softly, though the steel in her voice was undeniable. "It's about leadership, about recognizing that the industry reflects the culture we cultivate. And right now, that culture isn't good enough." David Lockwood nodded slowly, setting the white paper down with care. "You have my attention, Miss Arister Carter," he said. "Let's move forward." Olivia's posture relaxed just slightly, but the fire in her chest remained steady. This was just the beginning. As the meeting adjourned, Emma approached Olivia near the window overlooking the terminal below. "That went better than expected," Emma remarked, a flicker of relief in her voice. Olivia's gaze remained on the planes taking off in the distance. "It's a start," she said softly. "But we'll keep the pressure on until those planes carry more than just passengers. They'll carry progress." Emma smirked. "I wouldn't expect anything less." Olivia's phone buzzed. A message from Evelyn Reed. "Proud of you. Keep going." Olivia smiled faintly, sliding her phone back into her pocket. The skies were vast, but so was her resolve. And this was a fight Olivia Carter intended to win. Olivia Carter's presence at the head of the table commanded attention. Conversations quieted as she settled into her seat, Emma slipping into the chair beside her, tablet at the ready. "Good morning," Olivia began, her voice steady but warm. "Thank you all for being here. I know your time is valuable, so I'll get straight to the point." She paused, allowing the weight of the moment to settle over the room. "We're here because what happened to me on Flight 237 isn't an isolated incident. It's part of a broader, systemic issue, rooted in bias, ignorance, and a lack of accountability. This isn't just about one airline or one industry. It's about the standards we set for how we treat people, regardless of their race, gender, or background." As Olivia spoke, the room leaned in. Her words carried the weight not just of personal experience, but of leadership, the quiet authority of someone who understood both the stakes and the solutions. She laid out her vision with precision, each point sharpened by the long hours spent refining them the night before. Mandatory training, comprehensive sensitivity and implicit bias education for all airline staff, from executives to frontline workers. Data transparency, regular audits to track and report incidents of discrimination, ensuring accountability at every level. Diversity and leadership, programs designed to promote diverse voices within airline leadership, reflecting the world they serve. Passenger advocacy, a streamlined process for passengers to report incidents, with guarantees that their concerns would be heard and addressed. Olivia's voice remained calm, but there was no mistaking the intensity behind her words. She had thought through every angle, anticipated every question. When she finished, the room fell into a brief but heavy silence. The first to speak was Susan Bradley, the head of an advocacy group Olivia deeply respected. "Olivia," Susan began, her tone both supportive and challenging. "This is ambitious, and I commend you for it, but implementation is where even the best ideas stumble. How do we ensure these airlines don't treat this as just another box to check?" Olivia met Susan's gaze, nodding thoughtfully. "By making it unavoidable," Olivia replied. "Progress will be tied to public accountability. Airlines that adopt these reforms will be recognized and celebrated. Those that don't will face scrutiny, not just from the public, but from every corner of this industry. Transparency is our leverage." A murmur of approval rippled through the advocacy leaders. But then, Greg Williams, one of the senior executives present, cleared his throat. "I agree with the need for change," he said carefully, choosing his words. "But what about cost? Training programs, audits, and diversity initiatives. They all require resources. And in an industry already operating on tight margins." Olivia's expression didn't shift. She leaned forward slightly, meeting his eyes with calm resolve. "Mr. Williams, what's the cost of doing nothing?" she asked, her voice soft but cutting. Greg hesitated. "How much is lost when passengers boycott your airline after incidents like mine? How much damage is done to your brand when the headlines focus on discrimination instead of innovation?" She let the question hang for just a moment. "Change is an investment, not an expense. Greg lowered his gaze, offering a faint nod. The conversation continued, ebbing and flowing between agreement and resistance. Olivia steered the room with the skill of a negotiator who had spent years fighting battles no one else saw. Emma occasionally whispered updates, passing notes as needed, but Olivia carried the weight of the room herself. By the time the meeting concluded, Olivia could sense the shift. The initial defensiveness of the airline executives had softened, replaced by a cautious willingness to engage. The advocacy leaders left energized, their ideas finding fertile ground in Olivia's proposal. "We'll follow up with detailed action plans," Olivia said as the attendees gathered their belongings. "This is just the beginning. The real work starts now." As the room emptied, Emma turned to Olivia with a rare smile. "That was impressive. I think you've got them on board." Olivia allowed herself a brief nod, but her expression remained measured. "We'll see," she said quietly. "Words are easy. Actions are what matter." Her gaze drifted down to the notes scattered across the table, fragments of a movement beginning to take shape. For the first time since Flight 237, Olivia felt something stir within her. Something she hadn't let herself acknowledge before. But hope alone wasn't enough. It had to be built, brick by brick, into something unshakable. And Olivia Carter was ready to lay the foundation. The days following the meeting at the Stanton Conference Center passed in a blur of activity. Olivia's proposal spread beyond the walls of the conference room, carried by media coverage, word of mouth, and the relentless momentum of the viral video from Flight 237. Each day brought a new challenge, but also a new opportunity. Olivia sat at her desk in her home office, the glow of her laptop illuminating a growing collection of emails, drafts, and follow-ups. Outside the window, the city hummed quietly beneath the early evening sky. Her phone buzzed. Another message from Evelyn Reed. "Making waves already, I see. Proud of you. Don't let up." Olivia smiled faintly, her mentor's words grounding her. She typed a quick response. "Thank you. This fight is just beginning." And it was. Real change wasn't easy. It required persistence, strategy, and an unyielding belief in justice. As Olivia glanced out at the city lights stretching into the distance, she felt the weight of everything still ahead. But she was ready. The turbulence she had endured wasn't the end of the story. It was just the beginning of the storm. Olivia Carter sat in the minimalist yet elegant space of her home office, overlooking the quiet garden that often grounded her in moments of chaos. The soft hum of the city beyond the glass windows seemed distant, replaced by the quiet intensity of the virtual meeting displayed across her laptop screen. Faces filled the grid. Advocacy leaders, airline executives, and diversity consultants. This was their second meeting, and this time the tone was sharper, the focus clearer. "Training is the cornerstone," Olivia said, her voice calm but resolute. "But it can't exist in a vacuum. The audits, the reporting mechanisms, the leadership pipelines, these all need to work together. This isn't about ticking boxes, it's about reshaping culture." Susan Bradley, the advocacy leader, nodded from her square on the screen. "Agreed, but reshaping culture means resistance," Susan added. "We need a strategy for dealing with backlash, from staff internally and passengers externally." Olivia's expression hardened thoughtfully. "Resistance is inevitable," she said, "but so is progress. We focus on data, measurable outcomes. If we can show that these initiatives improve passenger satisfaction, reduce incidents, and rebuild public trust, resistance will have less ground to stand on." Greg Williams, the airline executive who had been wary at first, now leaned forward, his tone more open than it had been weeks ago. "We've started reviewing our internal incident reports," Greg said. "The numbers are sobering. I can't deny the need for change anymore." Olivia met his gaze across the screen. "That's where real leadership begins, Greg. Acknowledging the problem is the first step. Now, let's focus on solving it." Later that evening, Olivia sat in the quiet of her office, scrolling through the flood of comments on social media. Her initial post about Flight 237 continued to gain traction, rippling beyond her usual circles. Amid the overwhelming support were stories, hundreds of them, from people recounting their own experiences with discrimination. A young woman described being asked to leave her first-class seat because staff assumed she didn't belong. A Black family shared how they were removed from a flight after a minor disagreement. Each story fueled Olivia's resolve. One comment, however, stopped her cold. "Thank you for speaking up. People like me don't always have the platform to fight back, but you're fighting for all of us." Olivia stared at the words, feeling the weight behind them. She had always believed in the power of representation. But this was something deeper. Her fight had become a beacon for others. The next morning, Olivia arrived at the studio for her televised interview with the Morning Report. Bright lights illuminated the bustling space, while crew members adjusted cameras and whispered final instructions. Olivia remained calm, settled into her seat across from the host, Rachel Conrad. Rachel greeted her warmly but wasted no time diving into the heart of the issue. "Olivia," Rachel began, tone professional yet serious, "your experience on Flight 237 has sparked a national conversation about bias in the airline industry. How has it felt to witness this response?" Olivia took a measured breath, her posture poised but relaxed. "It's been overwhelming in many ways," she admitted, "but also inspiring. This isn't just about me, it's about the countless people who have faced similar treatment and never had the opportunity to be heard. Their stories are what drive me." Rachel nodded thoughtfully. "Your proposal for reform has been praised by many but also met with criticism. Some argue these changes are unnecessary or too costly. What do you say to them?" Olivia's gaze didn't waver. "I'd ask them to consider the cost of doing nothing," she said simply. "Discrimination doesn't just harm individuals. It damages businesses, erodes public trust, and perpetuates inequality. Investing in reform isn't just the right thing to do, it's the smart thing to do." When Olivia returned to her office, Emma was already waiting with updates. "The interview is trending," Emma said, holding up her phone. "We've received emails from 3 more airlines. They want to join the initiative." A small, satisfied smile tugged at Olivia's lips. "That's good," she said. "But we can't lose momentum. Keep pushing the proposal forward. Schedule another meeting with the advocacy leaders. I want their feedback before we finalize the next steps." Emma nodded, typing swiftly. "On it. Anything else?" Olivia's eyes flicked to her journal. That morning she had jotted down a fresh idea, one that could solidify this movement into something permanent. "Yes," Olivia said slowly, a new spark igniting in her voice. "Let's start planning a summit, an industry-wide event to officially launch this initiative. We'll bring everyone to the table. This needs to be public." Emma's eyes widened slightly. "A summit? That's bold." Olivia smiled faintly, already envisioning the next stage. "So is the change we're asking for." Emma's eyebrow arched slightly. "A summit? That's ambitious." Olivia Carter's smile widened, her eyes gleaming with quiet determination. "Change always is." That night, as Olivia sat by the window of her bedroom, the glow of the city stretched out before her. The twinkling lights mirrored the scattered thoughts that filled her mind. Plans, possibilities, and the weight of the responsibility she now carried. The journey ahead felt daunting, but Olivia knew it was necessary. She thought of the messages, the stories, and the voices that had reached out in solidarity. Each one was a reminder that this wasn't just about her. The hope placed in her hands felt like both a burden and a gift, one she was willing to carry. Closing her eyes, Olivia let the rhythm of her breathing settle her. She had always believed in resilience, in the power to transform adversity into strength. Now, more than ever, that belief had become her compass. The storm that had started on Flight 237 had evolved into something greater, a movement, and Olivia Carter stood firmly at the helm. She was ready to navigate the turbulence, to weather the resistance, and to lead others toward a horizon where justice and equality weren't distant ideals but tangible realities. A few weeks later, Olivia found herself back at the airport, waiting to board a flight for a speaking engagement. As she approached the check-in counter, she noticed a woman in uniform, a flight attendant, watching her nervously from the side. The woman stepped forward, hesitation in her eyes. "Miss Carter?" Her voice was soft but sincere. "I just wanted to say, thank you." Olivia paused, surprised. "Because of your work," the woman continued, "I've learned so much about how my actions can affect others. I'm sorry for what you went through, but I'm grateful for what you've done." Warmth swelled in Olivia's chest, though she kept her composure. She extended her hand, her smile genuine. "Thank you for saying that," Olivia replied. Change starts with understanding, and you're part of that change. The attendant's shoulders relaxed, a flicker of relief crossing her face as she stepped aside to let Olivia pass. As Olivia settled into her first-class seat, she reached for her journal, flipping to a blank page. She wrote a single line, Flight 237. The turbulence wasn't the end, it was the beginning. The engines roared to life, and as the plane ascended, Olivia gazed out at the clouds below. For the first time in a long while, she felt at peace. She had faced the storm, harnessed its energy, and transformed it into something far more powerful, a force for justice. Olivia Carter wasn't just a passenger anymore. She was a pioneer, a navigator charting a course toward a better world. And the journey was far from over. What started as an act of injustice became the catalyst for transformation. Olivia Carter didn't just rise above the prejudice she faced, she used it to rewrite the rules for everyone. Her story is a testament to the power of resilience and the ripple effect of courage. Even in the face of adversity, one person's voice can spark waves of change that inspire generations. If Olivia's journey moved you, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our channel for more stories of resilience, justice, and hope. Together, let's keep these conversations alive. Thank you for watching. We'll see you in the next video.